It's all covered in today's China Truths.
China's property collapse was only the opening act. A new, even bigger storm is gathering on the horizon. Experts argue over whether China is sliding into deflation or inflation. But on one point, there is no dispute. The economy is stuck in a dangerous depression. Renowned investor Bells recently warned that the real estate disaster is just the tip of the iceberg. If left unresolved, it could trigger a full-scale financial meltdown. According to Bells, China once inflated the largest asset bubble in human history, real estate valued at a staggering 450 trillion yuan. Now that the bubble has burst, prices are in freefall, marking a world-changing moment. Any leader who ignores this reality is playing with fire. On the surface, today's weakness looks like poor consumption, but the root cause is deeper. Families already borrowed against their future for decades. With debt repayments crushing household budgets, there's simply no money left to spend. Yet Beijing shows no urgency, taking no decisive action. The longer this drags on, the more inevitable a wave of bad loans becomes, pushing banks into crisis. Bells explained the vicious cycle. When consumers run out of cash, businesses collapse, mortgage defaults spread, and the banking system buckles. Chinese banks operate on extreme leverage, 10 times or more. A mere 10% asset loss can wipe them out. History shows this is no exaggeration. Just 2 decades ago, every major Chinese bank was technically bankrupt. Few remember, but that dark chapter may be about to return. This economic depression is now reshaping society. On September 8th, a Meituan delivery worker in Shanghai stood on Nanjing East Road holding a sign that read, "The Times are calling for China's Martin Luther King, and we demand our own union, our own voice, and an 8-hour workday." For the party, this is the ultimate nightmare, ordinary citizens openly calling for labor rights. Meanwhile, the downturn has created new political risks. It has opened the door for Xi Jinping's rivals to move in. The regime is on edge. Ming Zhuzheng, honorary professor of political science at National Taiwan University, explained in a live broadcast that after tightening his grip on power, Xi launched a 4-step plan. First, he provoked a trade war with the United States. Second, he crushed Hong Kong, forcing capital to flee. Third, he locked down the nation for 3 years, suffocating small businesses. And fourth, he advanced state-owned giants while squeezing out private firms. Together, these policies accelerated China's decline. Professor Ming warned that a prolonged economic slump leads to social stagnation, mass unemployment, rising crime, and political unrest. The Communist Party's history is filled with ruthless internal battles, and the same pattern is emerging now. Rumors are spreading, all pointing toward one theme: the hope of Xi Jinping's downfall. Anti-Xi forces are waiting in the shadows, and Xi knows it. That is why he has intensified purges and grown increasingly paranoid. Professor Ming warned that the CCP has sunk deep into endless power struggles. The only suspense left is who dares to strike first. And if Xi Jinping wants a way out, his only path of survival might be to walk away from communism itself. China's property market in freefall, anger explodes among homeowners. On September 7th, chaos erupted in Zhengzhou, Henan. At Sunak Airport Shenyuan Phase 3, shoddy construction triggered outrage among buyers. When residents tried to defend their rights, many were dragged onto buses by police, sparking nationwide attention and fury online. Meanwhile, Hangzhou's housing market has turned into a battlefield of collapsing prices. In district after district, second-hand homes are selling below the price of brand new ones, a phenomenon locals call breaking issue. Some desperate sellers have slashed more than 1 million yuan off their asking price within just weeks, igniting heated debates about whether housing in Hangzhou is entering a downward spiral. According to the Changjiang Evening News, this trend is spreading across Taoyuan, Genbei Newtown, and the future science and technology city. Taoyuan District illustrates the crisis clearly. At Haneng Hangyue Mansion, and delivered only this February, units are already being dumped at fire sale prices. The official price cap for its decorated apartments was 34,000 RMB per square meter, yet transactions are now happening as low as 26,000 RMB, a staggering drop that leaves even brand-new homes underwater. In Xiaoshan's Beiyuechao mansion, one owner admitted selling at a loss of nearly 300,000 RMB. His reason? Both new and resale properties keep falling, so upgrading now felt like the only choice. Agents warn that with supply far exceeding demand, broken-issue homes are unlikely to recover, and prices are still sliding. Online, opinions are split. Some netizens say housing has finally dropped back to reality, while others fear that anyone buying today could see their investment sink further. The dream of recovery looks increasingly uncertain. Guangzhou giant R&F Properties drowns in debt. Once celebrated as one of the 5 tigers of South China, Guangzhou's R&F Properties is now gasping for survival. Founded in 1994 and listed in Hong Kong in 2005, the company has revealed a staggering 27.6 billion yuan in overdue debt. On September 11th, R&F admitted in a public statement that it had failed to meet repayment deadlines. The breakdown is sobering. 8.454 billion yuan overdue on bank loans, 12.588 billion yuan from non-bank institutions, and 6.570 billion yuan in other debts. Both principal and interest are in arrears. The company claims it is actively communicating with creditors and scrambling to design solutions, but confidence is crumbling. Only a month earlier, R&F shocked investors by defaulting on US dollar bonds in Hong Kong. Its overseas unit, Yilue Co., missed a July 11th payment deadline on 3 senior notes worth 147 million USD in interest. Even after the 30-day grace period, the cash never arrived, exposing how severe its liquidity crunch has become. Experts warn, China's rich are now a dangerous class. In today's China, the rise and fall of the wealthy has become a barometer for the world to measure the country's shifting economic landscape. But under the banner of anti-corruption drives and the push for common prosperity, experts say the rich are no longer admired. They're a risky, even dangerous group to be in. Ruchir Sharma, chairman of Rockefeller International and a former senior executive at Morgan Stanley, recently published a striking article in the Financial Times titled, "Getting Rich in China is no longer glorious but very dangerous." The piece dissected how quickly fortunes have changed for China's top billionaires in just the past few weeks. Sharma pointed to the disappearance of Alibaba's Jack Ma from the rankings as a vivid symbol. In Deng Xiaoping's era, building wealth was celebrated. Under Xi Jinping, however, wealth accumulation itself has become a political liability. Over the last decade, Beijing's relentless crackdowns, anti-graft campaigns, regulatory assaults, and the common prosperity agenda have all combined to make being rich a perilous state. The consequences are visible. Last year alone, 15,000 millionaires quietly packed up and left China. Those who remain are careful not to climb too high on the rich list, fearing the spotlight that comes with it. Common prosperity strikes fear into elites. In November 2022, Xi Jinping enshrined common prosperity into the report of the 20th Party Congress, declaring that Chinese-style modernization must mean wealth shared by all. But in practice, it has sent shivers down the spines of the wealthy. French outlet Le Monde observed that many of China's richest now deliberately shrink from public view, or leave entirely, as real estate tycoons Pan Shi and Jiang Xin have done. Almost every high-profile billionaire has either been silenced, humbled, or forced to scale back. Jack Ma vanished from the public eye for 3 months in 2020 and has spoken little since. Retail king Wang Jianlin, once Asia's richest man, now keeps his head down. In today's China, the title of richest person is feared, not celebrated, and the campaign goes beyond billionaires. Finance professionals are also in the firing line. Over the past year, China's largest banks have been ordered to slash executive salaries. In some cases, bonuses were clawed back. Since August, at least 3 senior investment bankers have been detained. With the economy slowing, housing prices dropping, and household confidence collapsing, Beijing has made it clear those who profited most in the boom years are now in the crosshairs.
Factories in China are shutting down at a pace the world has never seen. Bankruptcy waves, unpaid salaries, mass layoffs. Millions of workers are suddenly left with nothing. Protests are erupting in city after city, and the myth of stability is falling apart before our eyes. Welcome to China Truths, where we reveal the truths that state media hides. For decades, Chinese factories were the pride of the nation, the so-called world's workshop. From cheap textiles to advanced electronics, production lines roared day and night, lifting millions from poverty and fueling China's meteoric rise. Migrant workers poured into industrial hubs, believing factory jobs meant security and a better life. But that story is over. Global demand has collapsed, foreign companies are pulling their supply chains elsewhere, and Chinese households, drowning in debt, can no longer spend. Factories that once expanded endlessly on cheap credit are now buried under mountains of debt they cannot repay. As loans dry up, production halts, bankruptcy filings soar, entire industrial zones look like ghost towns. The human cost is staggering. Workers show up to find factory gates locked, machines abandoned, and no sign of management. Some haven't been paid for months. Others are laid off overnight with no severance, no warning, and no future. Outrage is spreading, strikes, sit-ins, and blockades erupting from Guangdong to Henan. Families that once trusted the system now feel betrayed and left to starve. The government, terrified of unrest, tries to contain the damage. Videos of protests vanish from the internet within hours. Officials urge workers to be patient, but patience doesn't feed children or pay rent. Behind the censorship, the anger only grows stronger. Local governments scramble to hand out partial wages from emergency funds, but it's like pouring water on a wildfire. Guangdong, once the jewel of China's export empire, is now a hotspot of chaos. At one electronics plant, thousands staged a sit-in demanding back pay, clashing with riot police as security tried to clear them out. In Henan, garment workers dragged sewing machines onto highways, blocking traffic until their voices were heard. In Zhejiang, shoemakers protested outside shuttered factories, furious after being discarded like broken tools. The collapse is not just hitting workers. Small subcontractors depending on bigger factories are also collapsing, taking down entire villages with them. Truck drivers lose shipments, port activity declines. Dormitories empty as migrants retreat to the countryside in defeat. What was once China's strongest engine is now sputtering, threatening not just jobs but the very foundation of social stability. From world's workshop to nationwide unrest, the downfall of China's factories is no longer a hidden story. It is unfolding in real time, and the world is watching. The devastation is written on people's faces. Migrant workers who once proudly sent money back to their villages now return empty-handed. Families who borrowed heavily to buy apartments or pay for their children's schooling suddenly find themselves trapped in debt, staring down foreclosure. In the countryside, parents who depended on monthly remittances are left abandoned, plunging already poor rural communities into deeper despair. That despair is boiling over. In Sichuan, furious workers staged a strike after their factory sealed its gates and refused to pay months of wages. Riot police arrived, and violent clashes broke out in the streets. In Jiangsu, workers stormed a company's headquarters, flipping desks, scattering files, and seizing corporate records to stop management from disappearing. Every protest is quickly stamped out by authorities, yet each month the crowds grow larger and angrier. Beijing's greatest fear is clear, a chain reaction of worker uprisings that could ignite across provinces. Meanwhile, the government is scrambling to protect its image of control. State media paints a rosy picture, talking up new opportunities in green tech, digital platforms, and retraining schemes. But for millions who can't pay rent or feed their children, these promises sound empty and out of reach. The truth is simple. China's industrial core, once the largest source of jobs, is collapsing at a pace far faster than new industries can replace. What we are witnessing has no precedent. The very factories that powered China's rise are now ground zero for rage and unrest. Workers who once kept their heads down in silence are now blocking highways, marching with banners, and demanding accountability. Each factory closure is more than just an economic loss. It's a social earthquake shaking the foundations of the so-called China dream. For countless workers, that dream has curdled into a nightmare of debt, betrayal, and broken promises. This is not a short-term slump. Debt, falling demand, and rigid political control have fused into a systemic collapse. Three forces stand out above all: a debt-fueled growth model, a sharp decline in global demand, and policies that favor political obedience over real adaptation. For decades, cheap loans from state banks encouraged factories to expand endlessly. Local governments showered them with subsidies to boost GDP figures, rewarding scale instead of sustainability. That system worked only as long as the world kept buying. Now the bills are due. Interest payments exceed revenues, and thousands of factories are drowning in loans they can never repay. Bankruptcy isn't an accident. It's the inevitable result of chasing size over stability. The second force is external. The world no longer consumes Chinese goods like before. Inflation, recessions, and tighter wallets in the West mean fewer orders. At the same time, global brands are fleeing, shifting production to Vietnam, India, or Mexico to escape dependence on Beijing. Factories are left stranded with warehouses stuffed full of unsold goods and no buyers in sight. Inside China, demand is just as weak. Households crushed by mortgages and job insecurity are slashing spending. Too many factories are now chasing too few orders. The result is brutal: shuttered plants, abandoned dormitories, and a collapsing dream that once defined China's rise. The roots of this collapse are not random missteps. They are the direct result of Beijing's choices. Under Xi Jinping, loyalty has been valued above innovation. Instead of supporting private enterprise, the government clipped its wings, launching crackdowns that shattered industries once poised to create millions of jobs. The strict zero-COVID policy strangled supply chains, and countless small factories suffocated under impossible restrictions. Even today, instead of offering relief, Beijing buries the truth, censors bankruptcies, and tells workers to wait patiently while factories die in silence. This obsession with control leaves no room for flexible reforms. No serious debt restructuring, no real safety nets, no transparency. The result is a vicious spiral: factories crushed by debt, global buyers fleeing to other countries, workers left with nothing, and a government still in denial. What we're seeing isn't just the shutdown of plants, it's the unraveling of a system that once promised security in exchange for sacrifice, but now delivers nothing but unemployment, hunger, and despair. Behind every locked factory gate is a story of human tragedy: families torn apart, savings erased, and entire towns transformed into ghost cities. Millions of workers go unpaid for months. Many borrowed heavily to support their families, pay tuition, or cover hospital bills. Now they are drowning in debt. Parents crawl back to rural villages in shame, while elderly grandparents take odd jobs to feed their families. Some marriages collapse under financial pressure. What began as an economic downturn is now a human catastrophe. The anger is boiling over. Workers block highways, occupy factory floors, and march on government offices, demanding only what they are owed. But local governments, broke and overwhelmed, cannot deliver. Police are dispatched to silence protests, often with force. Arrests and chaotic clashes spread across social media before censors scrub them away. These protests reveal a dangerous truth. When the system abandons its workers, unrest becomes their only voice. For millions of migrant workers, the collapse has left them stranded, living in dark dormitories without electricity, surviving on food handouts, or sleeping in train stations while waiting for jobs that never come. Their dream of sending money back home has vanished, replaced by a daily fight for survival. And the toll on mental health is crushing. Online forums are filled with confessions of despair. "I gave my best years to this factory, and now I have nothing." Even those still employed live in fear that tomorrow their factory will close, leaving them abandoned overnight. The collapse spreads far beyond factory walls. Local restaurants, shops, and schools dependent on factory workers are shutting down. Housing markets in industrial cities are crashing. Apartments abandoned as families flee. Entire industrial hubs that once fueled China's rise are turning into hollowed-out ghost towns. And perhaps the deepest wound is generational. Parents who believed factory jobs would secure a better life for their children now watch that future crumble. Young workers, once hopeful of climbing into the middle class, face only poverty and disillusionment. This is no longer just an economic adjustment. It is a social breakdown threatening the stability China's leaders depend on. The collapse of factories raises a dangerous question. Can Beijing contain the fury of millions of unpaid workers before it spirals out of control? The government insists the crisis is temporary, but on the ground, the cracks are widening. Each strike, each viral video of desperate workers exposes the fragility of the China dream. The truth cannot be hidden forever. This is not simply about lost wages or bankrupt companies. It is about a system collapsing under its own weight. Factories are falling, workers are rising in protest, and faith in the promise of hard work is vanishing. The question now is no longer if the collapse will spread, but how far. China's factory collapse is no longer just an economic downturn. It is a human crisis tearing families apart and hollowing out entire cities. Unpaid wages, mass bankruptcies, and rising unemployment have shattered the promise of stability millions once believed in. Beijing can censor headlines, but it cannot silence the despair of workers left abandoned by the system. The question is no longer if the collapse will spread, but how deep its scars will cut into China's future.
Please share your thoughts in the comments section below. We will keep reporting on the COVID surge in China, so don't forget to subscribe to our channel and turn on the notification bell to get the latest videos. And thank you for tuning in.